Can I come back to yourself then, Matt? You seem to reserve a special venom for when it went from the provisional IRA to provisional Sinn Fein, or Sinn Fein as they now like to be called. In other words, once they got into the politics, it seemed to be what Malachy would call just out and out opportunism, that all of the idealism had gone. Tell us about that. Was that something that was a long time coming, or did it happen when they gave up the Armalite for the ballot box?
I wouldn't see the end of the armed struggle. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's the whole settlement is based on partition, and I even thought that they should have tried to organise a campaign to have a 32 county referendum on unity. Besides that, I suppose it's just realpolitik, whatever they call it. Once you get into the system, you have to make certain compromises. That's fair enough, but it's the pretense that they maintain that the border poll will be successful.
Yeah, but is it denial in the sense of the word? Because going back to 1969 and thereabouts, it was always that the objective is, first of all, to get the British out and then to unite the country. That clearly is a failure. That clearly did, in fact, I've always said that 40 or 50 years on, that the loyalists are more entrenched, or the unionists are now more entrenched than they were in 1970. So in other words, the movement went backwards. Once it got into politics, it went backwards.
Well, I remember asking, we interviewed Sean Garland for my other book,
yes.
And I asked him, I said, like, what did you think your strategy was in the 70s? It was similar to what Adams did 20 years later. And he said, we didn't really know.
Yeah.
No, you don't know what's going to happen. But what annoys me now is that they're on this whole thing about Martin McGuinness as if he's some sort of secular saint, and about winning the border poll when they haven't a hope of winning the border poll. I mean, the election statistics haven't changed since the mid-80s, you know. Nationalist vote's still around 41, 42%. And not all of them are going to vote for United Ireland. So, but that's their...
But even this week, they're still talking about it. They're still saying, "Oh yes, the Theresa May's problems shows that clearly there's that the United Ireland is closer than it was." I mean, personally, I find that delusional.
They come on about like on social media and press statements attacking the DUP as being homophobic and sectarian and.
Yeah, they've been in government.
But they always were. I mean,
they've been closing down hospitals with them for the last 10 years.
When you look at who are the winners and losers, I suppose, and you look at the DUP, what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
And they've been consistent. And when you look at the political careers, whether they say most political careers end in failure. Yeah. If you look at Pacey's career, he set out in the 60s to maintain the union. Yeah. He died having made the union stronger than at any time in the past century. Yeah. So his political ambition was achieved.
Well, how we ended up, and what they always said was that what we're left with is the hard men in that sense of the word. The SDLP came in with this great, how can I put it, with this great vibe that there were going to be these nice, peaceful nationalists after they got rid of Eddie McAteer and the Nationalist Party. When we were 16, 17, we used to be called in off the street when they'd have Paisley on the Late Late Show. That Paisley was considered, he was a figure of fun, and he turned out to be anything but. Haven't we now got a situation that is more entrenched than it ever was, that middle has been squeezed, and the last election pretty much showed that in the Westminster election?
Well, except Malcolm just talking coming over about the 7 million tourist centre in West Belfast, and it's all about that. It's fighting for funds. They don't actually create any real jobs. West Belfast is the most deprived constituency, except somewhere in Glasgow, I think.
And you see, that's what it's become about. And this is
And there's walls separating housing estates.
This explains their vote-based on Europe, where they now don't want a Brexit, when in fact we should be arguing for an Irish exit, and we should be both getting out. But it's about money, and it's about. But you can see that common thread.
Pork barrel politics
down here.
Yes.
You know, we have a multitude of community organisations and NGOs and who are funded, and that's what it's about. And I think one of the great services that Matt has done is, because we've all known these things, but he has set it out quite clearly in the book, the shift from being a so-called Republican movement to being effectively a Labour liberal kind of thing that's not remotely concerned about workers' rights as discovered. And it's all the popular cause, as we say, the thing about, for instance, abortion, LGBT rights, all of these rights-based issues. And it all becomes about that. We see them clamouring on about Halawi over in Egypt when, you know, the other side of their face will be saying we must defeat ISIS. You know, and there's all of these contradictions, and it's about whatever's popular. And but I think that they're no longer reflecting even their own communities. They're reflecting this middle of the road liberal kind of new politics that's out there, which actually means nothing to anybody. And I don't know anybody, and I'm sure Matt probably agrees with me, and I certainly wouldn't have joined any movement for equality, you know, or for to listen to people whose families made a good living out of the war in the North by singing songs about it, say at a commemoration to the hunger strikers in Belfast, that the hunger strikers died for gay rights. You know, I don't know anybody that would have picked up a gun for that issue, or for any of the other rights-based issues. I mean, I got involved, as we said, in order to get the Brits out and to reunite the island. And I think that, by and large, Southern Republicans have a different outlook to Northern so-called Republicans. And if you look, and I think in Matt's earlier book, he touches on where, I can't remember who the chief of staff in the Cronin, I think it was, in the 50s, said that he was keeping Belfast out of Operation Harvest because basically they were sectarian nuts and they couldn't be trusted to do anything.
You're very critical of what we would call the new Sinn Feiners, Malachy. A lot of them are, you know, particularly the who've come to prominence. They're private educated. They've, you know, they come from very middle class backgrounds. What's your thoughts on it? Were people like that, if you like, targeted as recruitment? Because they don't seem to be what I would call natural Republicans, and as Malachy points out, they seem to have very little affinity with the working class, and particularly working class areas that you and I would have grown up in.
I do say Malachy was saying earlier on, it's kind of become like a new Labour Party. People who would have joined the Labour Party maybe 10, 15 years ago joined Sinn Fein now, which is safe and a lot of them are genuine. I mean, Malachy was talking about equality. I mean, like, I believe in equality in terms of equal rights for people, but equality in itself is just an Orwellian phrase. It doesn't mean anything.
I think that drifts to us. I mean,
and it's become a substitute for Republicans.
There were a tweet from Mary Lou MacDonald the other day in relation to abstentionism, where she posted a picture of Collins and De Valera describing them both as patriots, soldiers and abstentionists. She forgot to say that both of those had turned the guns of the British state on Republicans and killed them. Collins judicially and extrajudicially. De Valera interned, jailed, hung, executed people both on the streets through his forces and in the jails.
Yeah.
You know, and to somehow, for even somebody who claims to be a Republican to use either of those people as a support for their position when they were the enemies of Republicanism. I mean, my uncles were interned by De Valera in the Curragh in the 50s. My grandfather was jailed by Collins's people in the War of Independence, or sorry, in the counter-revolution. So, for a prospective president of the Provisional Party to see those as our heroes shows how warped and how non-Republican their actual credentials are, and she'd probably be better going back to Fianna Fáil, which they'll ultimately do in any event.
Yeah. So, something you raised, Matt, and I think it's a very interesting one, it's not really being canvassed much in the media at all, is that the current crop of elected reps for Sinn Féin largely seem to be urban, and you pointed out quite a bit about the urban-rural divide and how, particularly with the issue of hair coursing, that they seem to miss the boat, miss the point completely about what were the interests of rural people versus what were the interests of urban people. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that? And because you were very close to Martin Ferris, and from what I've seen, you also one of the people who comes out quite well in the book is Martin's daughter, Teresa Ferris. Is it that blatant, or is it that obvious that there is that divide, that they focused on one area to the exclusion of another?
I'd say Martin and Treacy are more traditional Republicans, and on issues like abortion or immigration, they'd be more critical or reserved than people who would be inured to the party. But see, there's also, I think there's a huge disconnect between the people who vote for Sinn Féin and their actual policies.
I think the interesting thing on the hair coursing, I touched on this before, was that one of the bills brought in, I can't remember if it passed in Leinster House, was brought in by Tony Gregory, who was the TD for Dublin Central. Now, I don't know anybody in Dublin Central who gives a damn about hair coursing one way, or probably doesn't even know what it is. And yeah, but I think that's a huge problem on the left, that they get these causes. For instance, even, and Matt touched on abortion there, the most avid pro-abortionists are the same people who tell you we shouldn't hurt animals.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And they've no problem killing a child, but you know, they don't want any animals to be caged or kept in zoos, and they protest against circuses and things. You know, so that it's all this liberal college generated kind of thing around what's the popular cause, and they actually don't seem to join the dots, and it's about what gets them publicity. And we have, like, if you look at the Sinn Féin, the likes of Ron O'Brien and people like that who come in through, who could be in any party, but there was opportunities to be made in a growing party, and these people recognised that the Shinners were going somewhere politically. And on the other side then you have the likes of Murphy, Paul Murphy and Boyd Barrett, who are very similar, you know, and there's no doubt, I mean, it's saying to Matt on the way out, the sooner the better they all get into power, and then that'll be the end of them, because then the people will see that they're just the same as Fianna Fáil as Labour.
Well, one of the problems with the left is since the collapse of the socialist states, that economics isn't, you could even see with Corbyn's election campaign, it was a very good campaign, he did well, but he hardly mentioned economics, except for, I think, renationalising
the railways,
which is probably a good idea. But the left no longer talks about communal ownership or cooperatives.
And I mean, even if you take just on a small level on that, there's recent sale of city council properties in St Mary's Mansions, I think, in Foley Street there, to one of the housing associations, which is privatising, and it was voted for by Sinn Féin. And indeed, I mean,
same thing that led to the disaster
in London,
Grenfell Towers.
And you know, instead of saying there has to be a housing policy, the state, for instance, should stop selling off its houses to its tenants. It should repopulate the houses that they had. And the council, and Sinn Féin had huge control on the council in Dublin. And I believe one of your nemesis there, calling me a chum in the book, is probably going to be the next Lord Mayor. And I mean, I see even that individual who was commenting on Facebook in derogatory ways about Matt's book and calling it bitter and all that. I'm sure he hasn't even read the book.
Yeah. Well, that's
the thing. The left should be, on Dublin City Council, should be about public ownership of housing and proper housing. They're proposing to build 2 apartment blocks in Fingers, presumably by private developers, with no traffic, no schools.
They're more concerned about this week's.
And these are the same people who vote to put flags up over the GPO.
Or vote to change the name of the street to Savita have an Aqua Street, when in fact they have no power to do that.
Well, coming back to that one then, Matt, it's very interesting because we all, I think, read the same social media postings. You've been vilified completely on by what I would call Sinn Féin supporters as far away as Texas, and it's almost.
Tell me a text messages.
I can imagine, but it almost likes. I mean, the whole idea where we talk about diversity and plurality, but it only seems to apply when people agree with you. Has it that this? Was it always that rigid, or has it that because of the whole denial about the failure to win a united Ireland and the nonsense about border polls that are either never going to happen or never going to be won, that it's taken on a cult status, Sinn Féin?
It's compensation for failure, basically. Like yourself and Malachy are pretty much...
Yeah. Malachy's got his own, he's got his own invective as well.
Political histories, but we can get on well together.
And I get on with most people, you know, even though
there's absolute intolerance on their part for any sort of dissent. With very few small exceptions. They just cannot tolerate anybody saying what I said in my book. History is the truth. Unlike what some of other people have written.
Well, unfortunately, the first casualty of the limited agenda is free speech and the truth. And I mean, I touched on the Battle of the Falls, which was another reinvention by the provisionals, totally at variance with the facts, you know. But you know, you see when you attract in people, and looking at my own constituency again, particularly of people like Janice Boyle, and you know, and without being derogatory, she wouldn't be the best political mind.
But she might be a good mother.
I'm sure she is a good mother.
Yeah.
But we have somebody who's now in jail for torture. We have, and it's not confined to the provisionals. Others, particularly who were elected, I never saw as many gobshites and political opportunists and apolitical people with no political viewpoints whatsoever, other than, oh, geez, I can get onto the council. And they do so. And you know, when you have people who are so devoid of a political analysis and a history in politics, when you don't suddenly develop your politics in a day. And I remember being at a meeting prior to, during the course of the last local elections, and one of the Sinn Féin candidates was asked why she was standing in the election. And she said, oh, Mary Lou gave me a job in the office. And then they asked me to run, and I was privileged. You know, having said that, had they run 3 monkeys in my constituency in that election, they would have gotten elected. And in fact, they did run 3 monkeys. I got 2 of them elected.
One was a dangerous one.
Yeah. Okay, well then, let's finish off on this one. You've called it the end of the Irish Republican Army, but to a certain degree, are we looking at perhaps the end of Sinn Féin? Because, or is it going to suddenly transform itself into something quite different once Adams goes? Because clearly Adams is the spectre that drags it back to the past. What's your thoughts about Sinn Féin under Mary Lou MacDonald or Sinn Féin under Pearse Doherty?
Well, it's more likely to be Michelle O'Neill, I'd say. But,
that's has been canvassed.
I'd say with the DUP having won the lotto, basically, they're really in a bad place and they really need to get into coalition down here. And that's all their chips are on that. They want to get into coalition with Fianna Fáil after the next general election. It's whether Fianna Fáil go along with that or not.
Is there, sorry Malachy, I'll come back to you on this one. Is there a naive view that somehow or other they're going to do what we would call a reverse takeover? In other words, that everybody who's gone into coalition as the junior partner, whether the Greens, whether the PDs, you know, Clon the Fóblacht, you name it, they've all pretty much come a cropper. That's what I'm saying. Could that strategy end up being the end of the provisional Sinn Féin? Because sooner or later they'll see that there's a better opportunity. The opportunists will see that there's better opportunities in Fianna Fáil, just like Stephen Donnelly did.
But they're running out of options.
Yeah.
In the north, DUP are going to be calling the shots. If they go back into Stormont, the DUP is still going to be the dominant party. If they go into coalition here, it'll be as a junior partner, but they have to. If they don't go into coalition in the next general election, that's...
It's cactus.
You know, looking at the northern situation, no, they've gone back into Stormont. But if the figures had turned out the other way, and they had 10 seats, and the DUP had 8, we would be looking at a totally different situation. They would be over there, and they would be seriously talking about taking their seats at that stage. And I mean, I don't see any political reason that they don't take their seats in Westminster. They have the offices there. They've stood for election. They're not an abstentionist party. They're a partitionist party. They have effectively 2 parties, despite what they say. They have a leader in the north, Michelle O'Neill. They've Adams down here as national leader, and they've MacDonald as effectively the leader currently here. But I think what they've done huge damage to the Republican project, and they've destroyed, certainly I would think for this generation, any hope of either United Ireland or a British withdrawal. And I think that it behoves those of us who disagree with their strategy to continue to articulate and to continue to educate the next generation for the reality that was there. Because this island, and you know, the nonsense that they're going on about Brexit, for instance, that, you know, really would be a United Ireland, you know, and we should have special status and all of this. And even the Fine Gael's achieving the agreement in Europe that if Ireland is reunited, then the North will automatically go back into it. Of course it will, you know, if we're reunited. But I think that the fear of a hard border, I think the provisions have 2 fears. One, in relation to the North coming out of Europe, that's an end to the gravy train, and the millions of euro that's coming from Europe into the North to fund these dodgy projects and keep their people happy and give them jobs. And the reality of a hard border, if it's manned, for instance, by customs, they'll have to put the IUC, and I refuse to call them the PSNI, on to protect them. Then they have to put the army on to protect the cops. And that opens up targets then for dissidents.
That's the 50s campaign, which Matt wrote another excellent book about.
It only takes a couple of shots and a couple of troops to be whacked for the thing to kick off again, and that's their fear. And that exposes their policy and their whole notion around the Good Friday Agreement and the way they sold it, that the border is there. You know, they act as if the border's not there. I mean, there's an electronic border effectively there. And you know, there are still prisoners in McGabry. You know, there are prisoners in Portlaoise in an increasing number. You know, whether they're naive, and you know, you have to look at some of the operations people have been captured on.
The other thing is that if they keep the border poll as the centre of their politics and keep cranking it up, that's only going to lead to reaction from the other side, because if loyalists think their border poll is coming or that's going to be close, what are they going to do?
You know, I don't think that their demand for a border poll is a serious demand. I think it's just something to say. Yeah. I don't think they have any intention of pushing that.
I'm going to finish on the one question to both of you, and I'm going to put it to yourself, Malachy, because you said it at the very beginning. You said you didn't believe that the Republican movement should have got into bed with the civil rights movement. Now, I know Michael Farrell, I know Michael pretty well, and I've discussed this with Michael, and I said, at the end of the day, Michael, I said, you probably achieved far more of your objectives using your non-violent methods than Adams did with his. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think, if you look at Michael Farrell and People's Democracy, People's Democracy died a very quick death.
Yeah.
But
the idea is the values.
But Michael Farrell left the North in the very early 70s and down here as a successful solicitor down here, and hasn't really had any role in nationalist politics or northern politics. And he was never a Republican. I think his only contribution was to the forum that the Shinners had. I think after the Downing Street Declaration, he put in a submission to that, as I did myself, for what it was worth, and I got into serious trouble with Republican Sinn Fein, who I was with at the time, for putting in such a submission. And they had the public talks, but it was all optics, But you see, and again, the mistake in the civil rights movement, remember, it was the officials, it was people like Malachy who set up NICRA, and of course the Brazilians came along and split NICRA into ICRA and NICRA, and it was people like the Communist Party, I can't think of the woman's name now, just won't come to me, who were instrumental, and people like Breeds and Brandy Associate. No, there was a woman that she was chairperson of the Mary Sinclair, the chairperson of the Communist Party in the North. And it was those, and when you look at, connection to the Communist Party, when you people like, who left the officials in the 70s and became senior people in the Communist Party, and now people are going on work, now they're in Sinn Fein and they're on Vincent Brown every night analysing the papers, but he's firmly on the anti-EU wing of the provisionals, if there is such a thing.
What's your thoughts on that one, Malachy or Matt? If you go back to 1969, when we had the so-called rights agenda, which was coming through with People, Democracy and groups like that, which Malachy rightly says didn't last very long, versus the very lofty objectives and a particular methodology of bringing them about. At the end of the day, if it comes down to values, haven't the non-violent methodology, hasn't that triumphed much more than the violent one?
Yeah, except that's leaving out the fact that the non-violent movement was responded to with extreme violence by loyalists and the state, so you got into just a cycle of people reacting to that.
I think that there's no doubt that the civil rights that were achieved would have come because, in any event, it was the state's reaction to Catholics standing up for themselves and the emergence of the IRA to back them that led to the continuing cycle of violence. But when you look at what Goulding was saying at the time, and he clearly identified, and he's been shown to be right, that it would descend into a sectarian war, and the provisionals were, by and large, involved in it, particularly in Belfast, in a sectarian conflict. And if you look at, the provisionals throughout their course of this, the official IRA, or even the IRA, never used car bombs, never done commercial bombings in the same way. And the only time I think that the IRA blew up a building was Ballykelly, at the drop-in mill in Ballykelly, which was a British Army pub, and I would say no difficulty with that. But the officials didn't get involved in the and we can all say, well, there was warnings given, and but at the end of the day, innocent people died who should have never died. The war should have been confined, and I remember debating when I was with the Republican Socialist movement, debating just before John Riley was killed, and again that raises other questions how that all came about, and indeed the role of Lynch, who we mentioned earlier in that. But there was certainly a move there and an analysis being taken out. There was to be no civilian targets, and they were to confine their attacks on military personnel or political.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give the last word to Matt. The book's called The Tunnel to the Moon, the End of the IRA. For people who weren't around, for this generation coming through, what lesson would you like to take from the book? Clearly some of it's personal, but there are macro lessons to be learned there as well, Matt.
Well, I wrote the book based on my personal experience, so I wouldn't pretend to be,
No, but is there a warning out there of being sucked in to
Well, yes, as I was saying earlier on, I know a few people who were in prison because they became involved in various groups, and I would say the lesson, if there is any, is don't go there.
Okay.
There's no point. It's provost couldn't beat them, the officials couldn't beat them. These little micro groups I can go to. So.
Well, I think that the key message would be, I suppose, that if people want to get involved in republicanism, they should educate themselves in republicanism first, not in weapons training.
Yeah, Republican politics now should be about talking about a 32 county republic and how you bring that about, and maybe a 32 county referendum, how you win Protestants.
Well, you see, I mean, on the referendums, I mean, if you even go back to the proclamation in 16, the right of the people of Ireland to govern Ireland is indefeasible. And it's not a matter that any generation of Irish people can either say yay or nay to.
Yeah.
It has to be a tenet of belief that we have the right to rule this country, run this country by ourselves, without British interference or any or EU interference for that matter. And that has to be a core tenet. So that's not something that can be given to today's generation, because I don't even suspect that we would win a unity poll in this state, never mind in the northern state.
Okay.
Yeah, so it should be an intellectual argument rather than people walking around in uniforms.
Well, if the time comes, you see, and I've never seen as many people around in uniform since the war ended. But you know, people should look at armed struggle as a tactic, and clearly it's not a tactic. It's not a successful tactic at the current time. I'm not opposed to militarism, but in the current climate, it's not. There's no rationale for it. But people should educate themselves in politics, in Republican politics, and not be listening to cult leaders or people who tell you we're going out to shoot 20 Brits tomorrow. When, you know, since the provisional ceasefire, I don't think there was one RUC man killed in Constable Carroll, and there was mass marine and very little military attacks. And plus, you know, the whole connection now with criminality, which
it's a subject we're going to have to come through on another day. The book's called A Tunnel to the Moon, The End of the Irish Republican Army. It's written by Dr. Matt Treacy, and it's highly recommended. So, Matt, thank you for your time today, and Malachy, thank you for your time today.